Both Moldova and Transnistria have officially declared that they are no longer interested in Russia's mediation. Instead, they now intend to peacefully resolve this complex and long-standing territorial conflict entirely on their own, without any external interference from outside parties. For the first time in almost a year, representatives of Moldova and the unrecognized Transnistria held a one-on-one meeting. It took place on February 26th. The meeting can't exactly be called productive, but it's another signal to Russia. We can handle this without you. Putin has repeatedly stated that this is how it should be.
People should be allowed to decide their own fate. That's exactly what we, together with all our partners, will be working on.
But that's only in words. In reality, the Russians have no intention of leaving Transnistria. They are guarding a warehouse that's too important to them, which we'll talk about a bit later. So how can the issue of Transnistria be resolved, and what options are there for getting out of this stalemate? Make yourself comfortable. Arsenal is ready to tell you all about it. Russia came onto the territory of Moldova in 1992 and essentially forced Chisinau to freeze the war in Transnistria, which had started in 1989. The conflict itself flared up because anti-Soviet protests and the independence movement were spreading in Moldova, while Transnistria opposed them. The Russians, as usual, supposedly came to help. And so they supposedly helped froze the conflict and decided not to leave.
The defense doctrine of the unrecognized republic is to call for help from the Russian army at the first sound of gunfire. The entire strength of the army lies in a single phone call. If they manage to get through, the Russians will come and win the war. If they don't come, the USSR museum closes down.
Since then, there have been long and fruitless negotiations. It is impossible to resolve the issue because of Russia's presence, and Russia has no intention of leaving. The reason, as we have already mentioned, is an important facility, the largest warehouse in Eastern Europe, which is located just 2 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. According to experts, about 20,000 tons of old Soviet munitions are stored there, and probably some equipment as well.
It is believed that the Russian operational group of forces is still carrying out a peacekeeping mission. In reality, it is guarding a huge ammunition depot in the village of Kolbasna.
About 18,000 tons remain in the warehouses, mostly outdated munitions from the Great Patriotic War era, munitions past their expiration date and those unfit for use. A large number of aerial bombs remain. There is a small amount of faulty armored vehicles of outdated models left. Therefore, there is hardly any reason to stir up passions around the depots in Kolbasna. There will be no environmental catastrophe or serious destruction even if they explode.
Currently, there are only a handful of Russian soldiers in Transnistria. By the boldest estimates, there are about 3,000 troops there. It might seem easy to drive them out, but Chisinau itself can't handle it. The Moldovan armed forces number just over 5,000 people, with another 58,000 in reserve. Their army consists of ground forces, which include 3 brigades and 2 battalions, as well as air forces and river forces. The latter two are mostly symbolic. The Air Force, for example, could boast MiG-29s, but they are in storage and are presumably not operational. Things are a bit better in the ground forces. They even have American HMM-NWVs there. But that's basically it. Moldova doesn't even have tanks, whereas neighboring Romania does. They could help, considering that Moldova's president, Maia Sandu, has even said she wouldn't mind uniting her country with Romania.
In the late 1980s, there were national revival movements, and of course there were discussions about reunification with Romania, since Moldova had previously been part of Romania. But at that time, we couldn't know how many people would have voted for it, since no referendum was held. If we had held a referendum, I would have voted for unification with Romania.
If we assume that Romania would go to war against Transnistria, then, considering the military potential of the Romanians, the Russians there would disappear very quickly. Well, first of all, we shouldn't forget that Romania is a NATO country. Besides the obvious support, the Romanian military is on a completely different level of training. As for the numbers, the Romanian army has about 90,000 soldiers and the most advanced equipment. Let's not forget, they are part of the North Atlantic Alliance. We're talking about thousands of tanks, 1,500 armored vehicles, F-16S, HIMARS, Patriots, and much more. The Romanian authorities themselves also state that Russia must withdraw its troops from Transnistria, and they welcome the fact that this position has now become official at the level of the European Union.
We have held this position for many years and are glad that it has now become the European position as well. We have spoken with President Maia Sandu and the Moldovan government, and we find it encouraging that the people of Transnistria now have hope for a European future. We see an opportunity for the region's European integration. However, Russia must withdraw its troops from there.
While Romania insists on a diplomatic solution, Ukraine could also help Moldova by military means. And Kiev itself has hinted that it could do this, especially considering that Transnistria, for better or worse, poses a threat to Ukraine.
They maintain their own group there. Everything is going well for them. This could be more of a threat to us, and we can resolve this issue if we decide to take it on. Resolve it radically. But is it necessary to do this? Here is where geopolitical questions begin to arise.
The main problem is that Moldova itself is against it. The country's president, Maia Sandu, has repeatedly insisted that diplomacy is the only option. But if we return to the meeting between representatives of Moldova and the unrecognized Transnistria, it once again proves you can talk a lot, but is there any point? Moreover, a few days ago, Sandu revoked the Moldovan citizenship of 9 current or former officials from the unrecognized Transnistria. Those who lost their Moldovan citizenship include former Minister of Internal Affairs Ruslan Mova, members of Parliament of the unrecognized region Oleg Leontiev, Vadim Levitsky, Igor Buga, and Vadim Kravchuk, former Deputy Victor Guzun, First Deputy Minister of Justice and Head of the Central Election Commission Stanislav Kasab, and his Deputy Elena Gorodetskaya. In response, the authorities of Transnistria accused the Moldovan side of exerting pressure. They claim not to feel anything themselves, but for some reason, being stripped of citizenship is painful for them.
I view any actions against citizens of Transnistria that are politically motivated as measures of pressure. I believe that this is also how it is qualified in international law, in fact. That is why we see this as a certain kind of pressure on Transnistrians, on specific individuals, and on Transnistria as a whole. And we consider such actions to be destructive.
Whether there will be meetings in the near future remains an open question. And in the end, it all comes down to the fact that nothing can be resolved through diplomacy. Especially considering that the Russians definitely have no intention of leaving of their own accord. What do you think is the most realistic way to resolve the Transnistria issue? Diplomacy, or is military resistance still necessary?
After a long pause, political representatives from Chisinau and Tiraspol will hold meetings in the 1+1 format. On February 26, the talks will take place without the participation of Moscow's representatives, according to Moldova's Bureau for Reintegration. The negotiations will be held at the OSCE mission office in Tiraspol. Meanwhile, on February 26th, the Moldovan parliament adopted a declaration marking the 4th anniversary of the start of the full-scale military invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, condemning Russian aggression. Parliament Speaker Igor Grosu emphasized that Moldova stands in solidarity with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people.
We are grateful to our neighbors for the courage with which they defend their freedom, their country, and their future, and also for the fact that through their resistance, they are protecting the peace and security of the entire region, especially the Republic of Moldova.
According to the text of the declaration, the Moldovan parliament condemns the harsh actions of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, demands that the aggressor state be punished for the crimes committed, and supports Ukraine in achieving a just peace. The declaration notes the need to continue supporting Ukraine from international partners.
Providing Ukraine with the necessary means for defense and repelling the aggressor helps to strengthen both Ukraine's defense capabilities and the security of Europe as a whole. In this context, we once again emphasize the importance of further increasing sanctions pressure on the Russian Federation.
The authors emphasize that the accession of the Republic of Moldova and Ukraine to the European Union is of strategic importance for the stability, security, and sustainable development of the region and Europe as a whole. On the 4th anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, Moldovan President Maia Sandu also stated that Ukrainians are defending the peace and freedom of Moldova. Sandu emphasized that Ukraine deserves a just peace and that Moldova will continue to support it with unwavering solidarity.